So here's some additional ideas I'd like you to take on board that I think will help for you to understand how to become more compassionate of yourself when you start looking at yourself from a different perspective. And that idea is this. If we get bit by a snake or a spider, or we get an infection, or there's some kind of foreign toxin that's invading our body, our own body's defense mechanism is our immune system, which what it'll do is it'll pump all these white blood cells to the area to try and kill the infection, but that inflammatory response can sometimes actually do us much more harm than good. In fact, a lot of the damage caused through infection and bites and whatnot actually is a result of our own body's overreaction. Our immune system tends to overreact, and that can be far more deadly than the initial foreign toxin can. But likewise, our unconscious mind has a very similar function. Although its purpose is to protect us, if you look at the heart of most of the problems that we do unconsciously, they essentially stem from our neurology's desire or an unconscious intention to protect ourselves. Our problems, therefore, are essentially a defense mechanism. It's part of our mind that is trying to protect us from something. So the positively minded person, for example, who doesn't see the negative stuff, they're essentially unconsciously trying to protect themselves from the pain or the overwhelm of not being able to handle the negative feelings that they might experience when they become aware of the bad stuff. But likewise, the negatively minded person, the pessimist, they are trying to protect themselves by blocking out the good things too. What they're unconsciously doing is they're trying to protect themselves from getting their hopes up, only to become disappointed in the future. Perhaps they've had experiences in the past where they let their guard down, they thought everything was going to be okay, and they experienced the crushing blow of disappointment. And so their unconscious mind has decided that the pain of focusing on negative things only is still better to keep their guard up and keep them safe and protected against the pain of disappointment should they let that guard down, accept that things may be okay, only to be disappointed later. But either way, both people are blocking things out, or they're doing a problem with the unconscious intention to protect themselves. Let's take a person whose problem is that they are doing a lot of aggression and they're doing antisocial behaviour. You know, they're trying to keep people at bay. They're very unlikable. Well, essentially, unconsciously, they're trying to protect themselves from the pain of what if somebody actually likes me and then they abandon me, or they stab me in the back, or they turn on me. Again, it's this protection mechanism that's trying to keep them safe, keep their vulnerabilities safe. Let's take a person who does a lot of worrying. They're always ruminating about negative or worrying thoughts so much that they are staying up at night. They can't even sleep because they're just worrying so much. Well, again, it's a protection mechanism. They're trying to protect themselves from being caught off guard. Should they relax and stop worrying, their unconscious mind believes that the pain of being caught off guard is even worse than the pain of worrying. And of course, we know logically at the conscious level that's not true, but the unconscious mind, again, is just very overreactive. It's trying to protect those core vulnerabilities, like a turtle wears a shell around it to try and keep it safe, but it ends up being an extra and unnecessarily heavy weight that we carry the burden of as well. Let's say we take a person who procrastinates a lot, or they do a lot of avoidance, about their study or their career or their work. Well, think about it. What are they trying to protect themselves from? Their unconscious mind is trying to protect themselves from getting in there, giving it a go, but only to experience the crushing blow of failure. Or sometimes it might be because they're trying to protect themselves unconsciously from success. Because if we give something a go and then we succeed, well, what that does is now we've climbed up to a higher level, and so we have more pressure and expectation on us. So if we fail after we succeed, then the fall is even greater. And so sometimes unconsciously we just give up to try and protect ourselves from the pain of that fall. But either way, hopefully what you can see is a recurring pattern here. We all do it in our own different ways, but essentially our unconscious mind is trying to keep the guard up. It's trying to keep us safe from what it fears will damage or harm us some way should we let that guard down and be caught off guard and expose our vulnerabilities to the wounds that may have been inflicted from our past experiences. And so we've been talking about some pretty delicate stuff here. Pain, vulnerability, past wounds. I've been asking you to take ownership and responsibility for the problems that you've been doing. I reckon 9 out of 10 people would be way too uncomfortable with that stuff to have persevered, and yet you're still here. So once again, I want to emphasize how important it is that we don't overlook those little uncomfortable steps of progress, because when we identify each little step that we take, what that does is it creates the momentum. We're not consciously aware of it, but it creates the momentum to keep us going towards the direction of the change that we're looking for. So with that in mind, please take a moment once again to give yourself that permission to recognize and congratulate yourself, because you're still here when most people would have found this way too uncomfortable. Well done once again. You are on the right track. And I hope you're getting a lot out of this too. Now, before we go on with further explanation, what I'd like to do with you in the next video is to do a little mindfulness exercise. This is going to be a very interactive exercise where I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Please make sure that you're in a comfortable, relatively quiet environment with no distractions going on around you. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I'm going to take you on a bit of a guided visualization experience. And it's the aim here is to teach you the process of what we call mindfulness. Now, that's a key term I'd like you to become familiar with, mindfulness. The word mindfulness is often associated with things like monks and meditation and hippies and New Age stuff and things like that. But mindfulness has actually been scientifically demonstrated in a lot of studies to be an incredibly powerful therapeutic tool. Mindfulness is really simply the process of being able to become more aware of things which previously we were, hiding in our blind spots, only without the sting of judgment that society has otherwise taught us. That's all mindfulness is, just awareness without judgment. But it's a skill that takes practice. We need to learn how to do it, like speaking a new language or learning to read and write or ride a bike. We can learn to do it, and once we become really good at learning how to do the process, we can do it without even thinking. So, I hope you've been getting a lot out of these videos so far, and with that thought in mind, sit back, relax, get comfortable, and I'll see you in the next video.
Just as our body's immune system can overreact and create the damaging effects of inflammation, so too does our unconscious mind. It creates our problem thinking as a fundamental defense mechanism to protect against some kind of vulnerability. That vulnerability was likely the result of emotional wounds from our past. By recognizing that we are doing our problems as an unconscious intention to protect ourselves, it will help us become more compassionate and able to accept responsibility for doing our problem thinking. That's where learning mindfulness comes in, and in the following video, Stuart will show you how to do a very simple exercise that will get you started.